There's a moment when you realize you've been training for the wrong war, not to conquer, but to comply. All the routines, the willpower, the discipline, they told you it would make you strong, but they never told you it would also make you predictable. And in a world that rewards the unseen strike and the unexpected pivot, Machiavelli wouldn't tell you to push harder, he'd tell you to escape the pattern, rewrite the game, and trade discipline for dominance. Most people don't even realize they're living inside a system they didn't build, a structure that rewards their discipline only when it keeps them easy to manage, so they wake up early not because it sharpens them, but because some book told them that's what high achievers do, and they spend hours grinding on work they secretly resent, not because it's leading to influence or freedom, but because they've been conditioned to finish whatever they start, even if it costs them power. They cling to routines like rituals, repeating them out of habit, never once pausing to ask whether the outcome is still worth the input, and that's exactly where Machiavelli would start laughing, because to him, consistency for its own sake isn't dedication, it's delusion. There's nothing virtuous about sticking to a path that leads nowhere, and there's no honor in following a rule that no longer serves your rise. That's not discipline, that's self-imposed obedience wrapped in the language of self-improvement. But now imagine a different kind of mind, a sharper, colder, more dangerous mind, one that treats discipline not as a lifestyle, but as a tactical instrument to be picked up and put down depending on the moment. This mind doesn't wake up at 4:30 a.m. because a sensei on the internet told him to, he wakes up when it makes sense for the next calculated strike, he sleeps when recovery gives him an edge, he moves fast when speed gives him leverage, and he slows down when silence becomes the most powerful move on the board. He doesn't force himself to stay consistent for the sake of feeling accomplished, he watches carefully, and the moment a pattern becomes predictable, he breaks it without hesitation, because the minute they can anticipate your rhythm, they can trap you inside it, and once you become readable, you become beatable. The dangerous man doesn't celebrate rigidity, he commands control, of timing, of energy, of his emotional sharpness, and of his positioning. He's not loyal to a routine that makes him feel productive, he's loyal to whatever action puts him in control, even if it means abandoning the plan mid-move and switching strategy in real time without shame or second-guessing. That's why Machiavelli drew the line clearly, discipline is for soldiers, strategy is for rulers, one follows orders, the other rewrites the rules. And here's where it gets even more dangerous, because discipline doesn't just limit you when misused, it quietly kills your power from within. First, it conditions you to obey without thinking, you become so addicted to doing the thing that you forget to ask if the thing still matters, you keep following the path simply because it's the path you've always followed, not realizing the terrain has shifted beneath your feet, and that kind of persistence, when the goal has changed or disappeared entirely, isn't strength, it's failure on autopilot. Second, it teaches you to value endurance over awareness, and while anyone can grind, only the most dangerous minds know when it's time to shift direction, tear up the old plan, and build something smarter from scratch, because discipline will keep your engine running, but only strategy knows where the hell you're driving. Third, discipline numbs your instincts, it teaches you to silence the gut feeling that once kept you sharp, to override your inner signal because it doesn't align with the plan you're so proud of following, and before you know it, you're forcing yourself to push when you should have paused, missing the opening that could have changed everything. The very signal that would have made you dangerous is buried beneath your obsession with consistency. Machiavelli's most dangerous followers don't stick to blueprints, they track outcomes, and they ask one question relentlessly, not is this the right habit, or did I stay disciplined, but did this move get me closer to control, power, leverage, or victory? And if the answer is no, the move is discarded without hesitation, no matter how noble it felt, no matter how many days it had been repeated, no matter how disciplined it made them look, because to Machiavelli, the most seductive trap isn't failure, it's the illusion of virtue, and discipline, when worshipped blindly, is one of the deadliest illusions of all, because it feels like growth even when it's quietly keeping you small. Look around, the world is filled with men who are consistent, focused, and painfully disciplined, waking up at 4:30 a.m., journaling with devotion, eating clean, reading obsessively, and doing everything right by the book, and yet they remain unseen, easily replaced, endlessly obedient to a system that rewards reliability over intelligence, submission over insight, and loyalty over leverage. That isn't some accidental byproduct of modern life, it's design, it's how systems sustain control, because the disciplined man is ideal for containment. He doesn't ask questions, he doesn't push back, he doesn't veer off track, he follows orders, suppresses discomfort, grinds without resistance, and above all, he is easy to forecast, which is why Machiavelli would name him not a leader, but the perfect servant. Now compare that to the one who never moves on schedule, the man who doesn't live by routines, but by rhythm, who doesn't repeat habits for their own sake, but watches and waits for the shift in momentum, who doesn't feel guilt for letting go of outdated plans, because he understands that strategy is about agility, not consistency, and because he moves without a fixed pattern, they can't pin him down, and because he's broken free from the cult of discipline, he remains permanently positioned to seize power when others hesitate. That's the Machiavellian reversal. Discipline might earn you respect, but only strategy makes you feared, and in the arena of power, respect without fear is meaningless noise. So if you're dragging yourself through the same rituals every morning just to tell yourself you're consistent, if you're clinging to routines that no longer give you any leverage, if your need for discipline has become a crutch to avoid the discomfort of adaptation, then you're not playing to win, you're playing to survive, and the game is never won by the one who worked the hardest, it's won by the one who saw the board clearly, bent the rules without apology, and adapted faster than anyone. Discipline won't make you dangerous, only control will, and control doesn't come from force, it comes from flexibility, shaped and sharpened by strategy. The world may admire the disciplined man, but it fears the strategic one, because while the disciplined man is still trying to perfect his habits, the strategic one is perfecting pressure points. He's not obsessed with becoming efficient, he's focused on bending the entire system to match his will. And this is where Machiavelli draws a hard line, not against effort or structure, but against any structure that becomes sacred, because the moment your system becomes a belief, it becomes your cage, and he understood that every disciplined man, no matter how successful, eventually becomes a prisoner of his own perfection, and that kind of slavery, even when it looks productive, is still slavery. This is how it happens: you start with a habit, then that habit quietly becomes your identity, and before you know it, the identity becomes your cage. You begin telling yourself, I'm the guy who never skips a day, or I always finish what I start, or I push through no matter what, and it all sounds noble until Machiavelli looks you dead in the eye and says, that makes you predictable, that makes you vulnerable, and that makes you mine, because the second someone can anticipate your next move, you've already surrendered the upper hand, and when your discipline becomes your personality, your enemies don't have to fight you, they just have to let you play out the script you wrote for yourself. The Machiavellian mind doesn't fear breaking its own rules. In fact, it treats rules as tools, disposable and situational, useful only for as long as they serve the outcome and no longer. In practice, it looks like this: if the plan no longer works, he burns it without hesitation; if the routine stops producing leverage, he abandons it mid-stride; if a better opportunity appears, he reroutes instantly without guilt or apology, because he understands that power doesn't go to the most consistent, it goes to the most adaptive. So let's break this down tactically. Here are 3 of the most common traps where discipline disguises weakness, and what Machiavelli would do instead. First, the morning routine trap. You wake up early, hit your cold shower, journal, meditate, work out, sip your smoothie, and by 9 a.m., you feel accomplished. But the truth is, you didn't choose that sequence, you followed it. What felt like progress was just performance. Machiavelli wouldn't ask how early you woke up, he'd ask if any of it gave you an edge. Did it help you outthink, outmaneuver, or outposition someone who wants what you want? If real power means skipping the gym to close a deal, or sleeping in because clarity later matters more than pride now, he'll do it without flinching. Because he doesn't show up to feel productive, he shows up to win. Second, the streak addiction. Saying I haven't missed a day in a year might sound like strength, but it's not power, it's pride dressed as discipline. Machiavelli would call it self-imposed leverage. You've built a mental cage where breaking the streak feels like failure, even when the streak no longer delivers results. The disciplined man says, "I can't stop now, I've come too far," but the strategic one knows when to walk away, because consistency is only useful when it serves the goal, not the ego. In the moment a system stops producing real returns, it must be dropped, no guilt, no sentiment, because every day you stay loyal to dead momentum, someone else is pulling ahead. Third, the finish what you started myth. You were taught that quitting is failure, that seeing things through is always noble, but Machiavelli didn't push broken plans out of pride, he dropped them the moment something better appeared. He didn't persist to look honorable, he pivoted to win. This isn't flakiness, it's precision. While the disciplined man drags a dead plan out of duty, the Machiavellian switches paths mid-move and gains ground with less effort. The world doesn't reward those who finish everything, it rewards those who finish what matters. That's the split. The Machiavellian doesn't follow systems for comfort, he builds them for power, and abandons them the second they stop delivering. He doesn't worship consistency, he uses it when it serves him, then breaks it when it doesn't. The danger isn't in discipline, it's in following without thinking. That's not commitment. That's control. The man who can break his own rhythm on command is the one no one can corner, because no one sees him coming. So ask yourself, are you being consistent because it's effective, or just because it's familiar? Is it still discipline, or has it become fear wearing a structure mask? And are you proud of sticking to a system, even if that system stopped serving you long ago? Because discipline only becomes power when it's tied to outcome, otherwise, it's just another prison you built with your own hands and tricked yourself into respecting. And that's why Machiavelli never wrote books about motivation, never glorified morning routines, never preached about sticking to the plan. He praised timing, psychological agility, flexible control, strategic withdrawal, and above all, the ability to adjust faster than anyone else. In the real game of power, following a plan has value, but knowing exactly when to drop it and strike from a new angle is what makes a man untouchable. If this resonates, if you're starting to question whether your discipline is actually driving you forward, then stay with this video, because what comes next won't just motivate you, it will shift how you understand control. Most people never see it. That blind discipline isn't strength, it's performance, a form of socially approved self-containment that looks productive while quietly limiting your potential. People praise your grind and call it focus, they admire your routines and call it success, but they never see what it's costing you underneath, the power you gave away to protect a streak, the opportunities you passed up because breaking the pattern felt like failure. Machiavelli saw what few are willing to admit, that what we call virtue is often just obedience in disguise, and discipline is the leash we learn to fasten ourselves. You say, "I always push through," but the strategic mind asks, why, and for whom? You say, "I never quit," but he sees fear, fear of inconsistency, fear of losing the image. You say, "I'm locked in," and he knows, now they can find you, track you, stop you. Because discipline doesn't just make you rigid, it makes you predictable. And in any game of power, the predictable are the first to fall. So what does the dangerous mind do instead? It learns to turn inconsistency into a weapon, not through chaos or laziness, but through deliberate unpredictability. One week he's visible, the next he's gone. One day he's cooperative, the next he's cold and calculating. One season he pushes non-stop, the next he disappears to reposition completely. Why? Because unpredictability creates space. Because when people can't track your rhythm, they can't control your outcome, and the moment they lose their ability to predict you, they're forced to respect you. Discipline earns applause, but unpredictability commands caution. And in the pursuit of power, being feared will always take you further than being admired. Machiavelli believed no man should ever be fully read, he should learn to break his own patterns intentionally, so no one can hold a blueprint against him. If they expect you to respond instantly, make them wait. If they expect you to stay calm, show heat. If they expect you to show up, disappear. This isn't recklessness, it's image control through psychological advantage. Because once people become unsure about you, they stop reacting and start calculating, and that shift alone puts you in command of the board. Here's the part no one wants to admit: discipline gives you control over yourself, but strategy gives you control over everything else. Discipline says keep pushing no matter what, while strategy says pause, pivot, strike when it matters. Discipline builds inner strength, but strategy builds leverage, and leverage will always beat raw effort. This idea unsettles people, because most advice isn't built to create leaders, it's built to produce obedient, repeatable behavior. Wake up early, stick to the plan, grind every day, not to build vision, but to build reliability. Not rulers, just reliable machines. You weren't built to function like a machine, you were meant to be a weapon, a strategist, a force of nature, which means you have to unlearn the systems that were designed to keep you predictable and controllable. That doesn't mean you should embrace chaos. Machiavelli never praised randomness, what he taught was calculated disruption. He never said, "Don't be disciplined," he said discipline is useful only when it serves the mission, when it sharpens your skill, keep it, when it gives you leverage, use it, but the moment it turns into a pattern others can anticipate, a cage you've convinced yourself is character, or ritual you feel trapped inside, burn it down, because no habit, no matter how healthy, is worth more than your ability to dominate, and no system, no matter how efficient, is worth trading away your unpredictability. When the enemy is at your gates, when your plan falls apart, when the pressure mounts and your routine begins to crack, the disciplined man panics and says, "This isn't how it was supposed to go," but the Machiavellian smiles and says, "Perfect, now we play by my rules." By now, everything you thought you knew about discipline should feel shattered. You were told it was freedom, that it made you strong, that it would build your future, but Machiavelli would say that's only true if you control the direction, because if you don't, then discipline just makes you march faster towards someone else's goal. And that's the final trap. The world celebrates the man who's consistent, who sticks to his system, who never wavers, but it doesn't give him real power, it gives him a pat on the head, a shiny title, maybe a gold star, and then it quietly moves him aside to make room for someone more dangerous, someone who bends the rules with surgical precision, who moves quietly, adapts without hesitation, and shapeshifts the moment the game changes. That man isn't disciplined, he's Machiavellian. He doesn't live by routine, he lives by reaction. He doesn't wake up to follow a schedule, he wakes up to scan the battlefield, sense the shift, find the weak spots, and strike. If yesterday's plan no longer fits, he erases it without hesitation, because power isn't earned through effort, it's taken through clarity, timing, and adaptability, and discipline, when it hardens into dogma, destroys all three. A dangerous man isn't shaped by his habits, he's defined by his willingness to break them the moment they lose value. He uses discipline when it gives him control, chaos when it gives him leverage, and stays unreadable by breaking his own rhythm before anyone else can track it, because once you become predictable, you become vulnerable, and Machiavelli never ruled by being easy to read. So what should you do now? You don't need to abandon your habits, but you do need to stop confusing them with who you are. Start asking yourself, is this routine still sharpening me, or just keeping me occupied? Am I following this because it builds leverage, or because it lets me avoid the discomfort of change? And if I had to let go of everything today, could I build something stronger tomorrow, or would I collapse with the system? Because if the answer is no, you're not leading your life, you're just rehearsing it. You're not in command, you're on autopilot, trapped in consistency while others are playing for control. Machiavelli never feared discipline, he feared those who made it their religion. His greatest advantage was never brute effort, but the ability to abandon what no longer served him faster than anyone else could react. So stop clinging to what once worked. Let them admire your consistency, you're here to become untraceable. What they call discipline, you'll turn into adaptability. What they call routine, you'll turn into silence before the strike. And if any part of this made you rethink how you move, don't walk away now. What comes next doesn't just question your habits, it reshapes how you use power, timing, and perception itself. You're not done. You're just waking up.